What is Stop Destroying Video Games? Is it a good initiative? And what is the drama going on around it? That's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to split this video into 3 different segments, and I'm going to try to make this as uncomplicated as possible, that even if you don't play video games, you can understand entirely what's going on. We're going to keep all the information as simple as possible so that by the end of this video, you will hopefully have a well-informed opinion and hopefully understand why a lot of people who have been paying attention to this don't really understand how this could possibly have ended in such drama. To do that, we're going to split this into 3 different segments. The least important part is the drama going on around this, because I don't think it's that interesting. I think there's a clear, let's say, not great person in this situation, and reasonably, an initiative that just says stop destroying video games should not have been dramatic even to begin with. Then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the background going into the initiative and why it was even being created in the first place, and then we're going to talk about the solutions that it's proposing and whether or not these are feasible and could be a good thing. So, stop destroying video games. Video games have been under attack by corporations for quite some time right now. That might sound a bit like a dramatic statement, but it's really not. Some video games have been getting shut down. Content has been removed from video games that people paid for, and reasonably, there's just a lot of legal uncertainty with video games, even when it comes to the consumer, with video game manufacturers being mostly united in this against the consumer. There's finally some consumer pushback to ensure if you pay for a product that you keep that product, that developers cannot remove that product from you, which I think even if you don't play video games, if you buy a fishing rod, you would want to keep that fishing rod, right? If you buy a printer, you would want to keep that printer. And video game players, they just want that same thing. If they buy something, they get to keep it. Ta-da! Okay, so the original video that Accursed Farms put out got 386,000 views. And this is, we're going to talk about the drama here. So originally explaining the background of the problem, what he was going to do, what his initiative and all that, that got 386,000 views. A response from a video game developer spreading a lot of information, and I'm not going to mince words on this one, spreading a lot of disinformation and very much coming at this from 100% a corporate-friendly mentality and 0% from a consumer-friendly mentality. This video got 1.2 million views, which is to say that at over a 3-to-1 ratio, more people saw the misinformation about the movement than saw the original information about the movement. Now we have 1.2 million views and 554,000 views. So clearly these 2 videos coming in with almost 2 million views have been seen significantly more than anybody else. Recently, Accursed Farms put out another video with 515,000 views, still not as much as either of these videos, talking about how the spread of this information, of this misinformation has caused lots of journalists, lots of political entities, lots of these people to pick up this story, write articles on it from Pirate Software's perspective over here, and just continue to help spread this misinformation, and that his movement basically couldn't get any traction because all the news sources, everybody was just relying on the misinformation instead of his original correct information. This finally did get picked up, but still not to the amount that Pirate Software's videos get picked up. This did get picked up, and a lot of people started to say, well, actually, he makes compelling arguments that you straight lied, Pirate Software. He makes very compelling and very believable arguments that Pirate Software is spreading misinformation deliberately to the benefit of corporations over individuals. Pirate Software then put out this tweet trying to defend himself. In effect, in my opinion, I don't think it was reasonable. I don't think he did himself a good job. And I don't think he really addressed the fact that he did deliberately spread misinformation to the direct benefit of corporations. You might notice here that at the very least, when it comes to video games, lots of people are fed up with corporate greed. Lots of people are fed up with corporate greed across the political spectrum, the class spectrum, everywhere. Lots of people are just very frustrated that we're being nickeled and dimed everywhere. And people finally want some actual legal defense, at the very least, again, against losing products that they paid for. That's the background of the drama. Now we need to talk about the background, exactly what's been going on with video games to cause this to even be a problem. Now, I did compile this and I did source a lot of different things here, so you will not have to actually just believe me. You will not have to trust me. I will just show you right in front of you exactly what's going on. Okay, so what has been going on with video games? For those of you who play video games, you might not even be noticing what's going on. For those of you who don't play video games, you definitely don't know what's going on. But effectively, games that were purchased, games that were purchased no longer function. In effect, you give a game maker money, they take your money, they give you a game, and then at a later date, they say, nah, and they shut it down, and you can't use it anymore. And that's obviously not great. The primary reason that this is happening, and I'll give you an example here, City of Heroes was a still profitable MMO that was shut down because the publisher of the game just didn't want, to run it anymore. All access was revoked within months of the announcement, and all purchases and subscription fees were kept by the company. MMOs get shut down all the time. That's massively multiplayer games. These get shut down all the time. And these are like the first big prominent games that people pay for that get shut down. And this has definitely been a recurring issue over the last 20 years that these things can get shut down. But it's been, I guess I should say the problem has been it's isolated to MMOs. It hasn't really expanded beyond MMOs. It's been an isolated problem. And because of that, more people were willing to accept it. But in the current day and age, as we continue to reach the future, the problem is that more and more games are doing online only video games, right? You can only play this game with access to the internet. And because you can only play these games with access to the internet, the game developers can then take down support for that game, which renders it dead. So imagine, once again, let's use the fishing rod example here. Imagine a fishing rod that had to connect to the internet and make sure that it was allowed to fish every time you wanted to use it. And for, let's say, 10 years, it worked out just fine. But at the end of that 10 years, they just go, never mind. And they shut down the server that tells you the okay. So every time the fishing rod tries to connect to the internet, it says, oh, there's nothing here. And it can't. And you just got a dead fishing rod now, one that you paid perfectly good money for. But in other words, example, The Crew shut down all online support in 2024. Now, The Crew is a game that sparked all of this because this is like the first big game that had shut down that wasn't just an MMO, but actually was a mostly single player / cooperative game, meaning not a game that should ever have needed total online support. There are many games that need total online support these days, but companies have kept them going for the most part because everyone's kind of in this legal gray area right now. What happens if you shut it down? Will there be repercussions? Well, that's exactly where we're at. Now that a game has shut down and is no longer playable, there needs to be legal repercussions for this. And there needs to be a legal consequence for this. There needs to be legal movement for this. If this continues, if games like The Crew can continue to be shut down, and I'll show that it's way more than The Crew, it's lots of games are actually teetering at the edge right now. If these can be shut down, then we will run into some serious issues. The Crew shut down all online support in 2024, which rendered the game completely unplayable. Even single player was unplayable. This sparked the entire debate as this was a blatant shutdown of a game that could have continued as a single player game. The other problem that definitely has led to this is games are increasingly given a shelf life so that developers can push players to their next products. Now, this problem has been increasing over the years where games are given features, maybe not the entire game as a whole, but they're given features, they're given elements of the game that over time will be shut down. This means that the game will become less playable as time goes on, so that the developer wants you to buy the next version of the game. Example, EA keeps online servers for their games up for 2.5 years. After that time, the online servers are taken down and the expectation is for the consumer to buy their next product. In this case, the FIFA games, which are football soccer games, expect players to continue to purchase new copies to play online. And just to show you this example here, I'm not going to use a news article, I'm not going to use anything else, I'm just going to use EA's website themselves, which actually just outright tells you November 4th, 2024, FIFA 22 online services and features will be retired on November 4th, 2024. EA keeps games online for about 2.5 years, at which point they shut it down. You can no longer play it online. You can no longer use those online features. You can no longer do anything online. And the expectation, the assumption from EA is once they shut down FIFA 22, you'll buy FIFA 23 and FIFA 24 and FIFA 25. Now you might say to yourself that, well, once you have FIFA 23, well, no, because they remove, as I say here, FIFA 23. EA Play members, please note that we're removing FIFA 23 from the playlist on September 16, 2024. And the intention here is they remove it from the ability to be purchased, then they shut down its online play, and then they say, if you want to continue to play online, buy the new copy. Now, this, of course, is just one example. This, of course, is just what I would call developers pushing boundaries. They're seeing how far they can push people, how far they can take things, that it will, A, continue to be legal, and B, people will continue to accept it. And for those of you who don't maybe understand, these are very large corporations who have effectively monopolies over their specific genre. FIFA, for example, just has a license from, well, FIFA. So it becomes very difficult for other games to be made about the same subject matter. It becomes very difficult for them to get into the market because they have effectively a monopoly on these sorts of stuff. So developers keep pushing boundaries on what is acceptable. Example, Destiny 2 removed 2 years of paid content from their game. This content was paid for in full and is no longer accessible in-game by any means. The money was kept and the game keeps being updated, but what was originally paid for can never be accessed again. Here's a Forbes article, Destiny 2 and the ethics of deleting 2 years of paid content. Now that we have the full list of everything, and this is from 2020, by the way. So this is 5 years ago now, and if you don't believe, developers have seen that 5 years ago they could remove all that content, that 5 years ago they got away completely with this. Developers have definitely looked at this and they've definitely said to themselves, well, what can we get away with next? But let's read the article. Now that we have the full list of everything Destiny 2 is vaulting, i.e. deleting from the game with Beyond Light, that was the expansion. So that's like a new content was called Beyond Light, and with the new content, they were just deleting all the old content that you paid for, which is, again, I find myself pondering a question that has plagued the game since the content vault was announced. What are the ethical or potentially legal implications of deleting previously paid for content from a video game? And what are they? What exactly are the implications? Because thus far we have seen that none. They can get away with it completely, and the consumer has absolutely no rights on this. Across all industries, subscription-based services are becoming more common as manufacturers want consumers to pay to continue to use their products. Example, HP CEO wants to make his printers a subscription-based industry. I'm sure even if you don't play video games, I'm sure even if you do other activities with your life, you've noticed that increasingly subscription-based industries are taking over. Many people don't own movies anymore. You own movies. Well, you don't. You have Netflix, and then if the movie leaves Netflix, oops. Some people that buy movies aren't actually buying movies. You're getting a license from something like maybe Amazon or HBO or some other products. You're getting a license from them to watch them. And we've already seen with YouTube that YouTube originally did offer movies and shows, and you could buy them on YouTube, and you still can. But as they've increasingly tried to twilight that and increasingly tried to move on past that and no longer get into that activity, it has become increasingly difficult for me to watch the movies that I bought on YouTube. For example, I bought the Lord of the Rings Extended Edition on YouTube, and it is increasingly difficult to even find where they hide that. Will I have to buy Lord of the Rings again on another service? Probably. Eventually, YouTube will probably pull the license entirely and just say, tough titties, buddy. But let's talk about this for a second. Let's start with the HP CEO. Now, CEO of HP. HP is a printer company. HP CEO says goal is to make printing a subscription. HP has continued to release software updates for its dynamic security system that breaks its printers when they're used with third-party ink cartridge, an extremely controversial practice that has gotten the company hit with several lawsuits. Now, in an interview with CNBC, HP CEO Enrique Lores has shed some light as to why the company pushes malign software. Based on Lores' response, in Ars Technica's analysis, it seems to have something to do with HP's ultimate goal of pivoting to a subscription-based model for using its printers and ink cartridges. Our long-term objective is to make printing a subscription, Lori says. That is really what we have been driving. So this isn't obviously just a video games only issue. This is an issue across all markets everywhere. Increasingly, life has been made a subscription, and video games want some sort of legal defense against this. They want something that they can do. Video gamers want something they can do that they say, no, you can't just remove my game. You can't just try to make me buy the new product. You need to leave me what I bought. You cannot take that away. In other words, consumers have no legal power to prevent any of this from happening. The power is entirely within the companies. Change only happens when law changes. Example. Despite being seen as a champion of consumers' rights, Valve only gave out free refunds once they were sued successfully by Australian courts. No company is on your side, and I really want people to understand that. People think that Steam's free refunds was a consumer-friendly program that they did out of the goodness of their hearts because they loved us so very much, and Valve is... whereas a normal company, let's say it was like 100% company, 0% consumer, Valve is at least 50-50, but you need to remember that that's still only 50-50. They're keeping your interest and the corporate interests about aligned with each other. They're just not favoring one or the other. But it is important to note, again, that they only gave these free refunds because they were sued in Australia. And then once they had to give refunds to Australians, they decided they would just give it to everybody to avoid legal implications, which the whole point of this is to say that once we do get some law changes in the European Union, it is pretty obvious that they will just, corporations as a whole will just take those policies and apply them globally because everybody wants to sell within Europe. So Chinese products, American products will get these advantages if the European Union has this initiative go through. Now, to explain to people, maybe you don't understand everything. If you ever owned a console, if you ever owned Mario, anything like that, single-player games can have online-only components added, so they can be shut down in the future. Online-only is also a legally gray area with the potential for any company to abuse it. You can attach online only to any single player game, to any game anybody buys, and legally people will have to technically have an online connection, which you can sever to destroy the game. Even games that are entirely single player can have this. It is, once again, an entirely legal gray area because nobody really knows what happens if this just becomes the norm. In the past decade and a half or so, it has become increasingly common for online only to be applied to pretty much every game these days. Not literally every game, but many of them. If nothing is done, certain games are at a serious risk. Dead by Daylight, if the developers decide to shut down, all purchases will be lost, all DLC will be lost, and the game is just gone. Currently, there's no legal recourse to it. League of Legends is in the same way. Fortnite is in the same way. All your skins, all those battle passes you bought, everything will be gone if they decide they just don't want to run the servers anymore. Diablo 3 only has single player without online play on consoles. If you own Diablo 3 on a personal computer, then they can shut it down and you will not even be able to play single player anymore. StarCraft 2 is in the exact same way. Even on the mobile side, we have games like Super Mario Run, which are very... This game is like a decade old, so to speak, that this has become outrageously industry standard in the last decade. Super Mario Run, which I think was 2016, needs online only. So even your Mario games, even your mobile Mario games will literally cease to function if Nintendo just goes, nah, we need to move them onto Super Mario Run 2, shut it down. Any game that needs online play to function, I should say online services to function, can be shut down entirely by the developers. If this sounds outrageous, then it is outrageous. That's the entire point of this initiative. I don't think people really understand how corporations have just been playing nice with us, and that the crew was kind of the canary in the coal mine dying, so to speak, that like, hey guys, they're starting to actually shut down the single player games that have been at risk of being shut down. Like, this is actually kind of a big issue right now. We need to get on this right now. And again, do not rely on Steam. What I have Steam right here. Do not rely on Steam, because even Steam is at risk of just not really doing anything. To put this into perspective, if these companies are constantly trying to see how far they can go, we should not be relying on Steam to defend us. We should be relying on actual laws, actual defenses. In other words, if there's a ninja who keeps trying to kill us, we shouldn't say, well, our bodyguard keeps stopping the ninja. He keeps trying to kill us, right? So at a certain point, we need to actually stop the ninja. We can't just rely entirely on our bodyguard. We can't rely entirely on Steam, because Steam could be compromised. Gabe Newell could die and other people could take control of the company. Gabe Newell could just decide one day he doesn't care anymore. So entirely relying on Steam to be this defender of companies doing good, I guess is one way to put it, to entirely rely on Steam is not a good idea at all. It is a terrible, terrible, terrible decision. But let's talk about their solution. Force developers to have an end-of-life plan for their product. The product must be left in a playable state once all development is discontinued. Now, of course, this has become the controversial statement here, as a lot of people have noticed that leave said video games in a functional, playable state is a very vague statement. So vague, in fact, that Pirate Software made this the majority of his argument here, where he does not like this playable state. As Accursed Farms here did respond, and as he did say, it's left intentionally vague because this initiative will then go forward towards lawmakers who will then have to rule on this. They also want it to be legally blind. They want it to be legally binding that games are left in a playable state, but they don't want it to be overbearing to where it could actually negatively impact them. That's intentional, and I think that's actually well done. But to talk about this more specifically, there are games in the past that have had their development discontinued, that have been at risk of having everyone lose access to their product, that actually continued anyway. How is that possible? Well, I'm going to talk about this, but I did write a whole thing here. This is an issue that you will find great difficulty finding perfect examples for. The reason for that is that this simply hasn't been a big issue in the past. As I mentioned earlier, finding games that developers shut off that then continued on anyway, thereby proving it was possible, isn't really something you can find a lot of examples for, because this really hasn't happened in the past. That's why it's a big deal right now. The only games really that have been shut off by developers is MMOs, which, as I will show here, have actually managed to continue. And there is a good basis for exactly how this sort of system would continue to work. But let's go on. Even games where they focus on multiplayer allow their single player content to continue to be played. It's largely unheard of for a game to totally and completely shut down, with absolutely no way for the consumer to access their product in any way. The problem now is that companies have figured out that this is legal, and boundaries will once again be pushed. The consumer will, in many ways, find themselves increasingly barred from old games and content that they have paid for in order to force them to pay to access new content. While this might not seem like a big deal to an outside observer, that you continue to play newer games within even the same series have had significant quality downgrades. If the older games were no longer accessible, then players would find themselves forced to pay to get what they would consider to be an inferior product. Now, to explain all this, some people might not understand the issue. You continue to pay the developers and you continue to play their game, right? You pay, you play, you pay, you play. But that's not really how this is supposed to be. If you pay to get a game, you get the game. That's how it's always been. That's how it will be. There are certain games with subscription fees, and those are more of a gray area. Things like MMOs have always been more of a gray area. But I will show you that even MMOs work within this proposed system. However, there are multiple games that have shown that if developers were given the opportunity to shut down these old games and force you to move on the new one, the consumer would find a significant quality downgrade. There are many games whose next products were just simply not as good as the ones before. And as we've seen, with these boundaries being pushed over and over, companies might, because these newer products are inferior, they might just shut down the older products to force people to upgrade. For example, if you have a really nice car and the next year's version of that car is bad, and then the next year's version of that car is bad, you might just stay with your old car, because why not, right? Like, this car is just better. All the new models they're making are awful, right? But imagine they could just turn your car off and force you to move on to a new car, an inferior car, a new car that is inferior and you had to pay for it. To give you examples of this, I've come up with 3 different games. Victoria 2 on Steam presently still has hundreds of players. The peak for today was 531. So there are at least 531 people every single day logging in to play Victoria 2. It currently has a 90% review score, which is, 92%, which is outrageously high. People love this game, and it is doing quite good. Its sequel, Victoria 3, currently has a 67% review score. Despite having far more people playing it, it reviewed significantly worse. Again, to try to emphasize how bad this system is and how bad it could get, Paradox Studios could, hypothetically, add new online-only components to all their games, so if they end up in a scenario where these 500 people are just playing the older game because they just find it superior, they could disable it. They could say, no, get out of here, move on to the next one. And you have no legal recourse right now. Okay. Total Warhammer 2, currently reviewed at, once again, 92%. That's a very high review score, making it one of the highest reviewed games of all time. Even today, it still had 2,000 people logging in to play it. This is a game that hasn't been updated in, 5 years now? So this is a very high amount of people still logging in to still continue to play this game. Its sequel, Total Warhammer 3, has a 72% review score, which is to say, clearly not as good. Despite the fact that Total Warhammer 3 was supposed to be a direct upgrade, despite the fact that it was supposed to just be Total Warhammer 2, but now 3 and just better in every way, its review score has not been good, and it's been met with a lot of people not enjoying it. Many people, 2,000 people daily, still log in to play its prequel because they just prefer it. And again, under the online-only system, companies could attach an online-only component and say, your Total Warhammer 2 does not work anymore, move on to Total Warhammer 3. Another example that is somewhat recent is Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter Wilds has a 53% review score, which is bad. It is currently, I actually checked it myself, overwhelmingly negative reviewed, which is to say I think only 16% of people gave it a favorable review in the last 30 days, which is to say people are overwhelmingly frustrated, disappointed, and very much hating on this game. Its prequel, the game before it, Monster Hunter World, reviewed at 88%, putting it maybe not at the top of all time, but a pretty good review score. This one is particularly hilarious because Monster Hunter Wilds has a mere 13,000 people online at peak today, while Monster Hunter World had 21,000. Once again, Capcom, often as greedy as they are, could very much, if they release DLC for Monster Hunter Wilds and they want to force people off of Worlds, could hypothetically have attached an online-only component where they now say Monster Hunter World is discontinued, move on and buy our far inferior product. I said all that to prove to you guys, yes, there are games, even modern games, that are just worse than the ones that came before it. And I would not put it past developers, nor should you, especially now that we've seen it's possible legally, we should not put it past developers to force people to move on to the next product. Games that were discontinued by the developer with an online-only component that still managed to remain in a playable state. So to give you guys some good examples of games that have continued, games that show this is possible, it is possible to leave said video game in a functional playable state, even games that are online only. This is possible. First off, it should be possible with any game, but some people will use examples to say, well, what about MMOs? What about this? What about that? It is possible. In fact, dedicated player bases of people that very much enjoyed the product will foot the bill for their own servers, so long as the developers made it reasonably possible for them to do so. Star Wars Galaxies was shut down. That's an MMO. It was called Star Wars Galaxies. Massively multiplayer online game Star Wars Galaxies. Was shut down only to later have pirate servers enable people to play online again. Pirate servers are unlicensed servers that are not supported or enabled in any legal capacity. The source code was also leaked by a former employee to the pirate servers, enabling them far greater capacity at properly mimicking the original servers to allow the original gameplay to continue. So in this example, not the company itself, not the parent company itself, but a former employee leaked the source code. That's how the game functions. That's all the back-end stuff. He leaked it, gave it, obviously, to the developers of these pirate servers so that they could make these servers work far better and they could allow people to continue to play Star Wars Galaxies even though officially it was shut down. The player base has managed to fund and create its own servers, but the issue is they are still pirate servers and can be shut down by Disney. So do you think Disney might shut down this game if they wanted a different product? Of course they would, because legally we're currently in a total gray area. They have all the power and we have none of it as consumers. And if Disney decided to put out a new Star Wars product and they wanted to kick all these Star Wars Galaxies players out, they would have full rights to do that. They could just say, nah, guys, get off your game. We're done with you. Go buy our new product. They have no power at all. Additionally, the source code leak was unauthorized and could have legal consequences as well if Disney chose to. They are entirely at the mercy of Disney from a legal perspective, and it's not a great situation to be in. So as I'm trying to explain here, even though this has worked out for Star Wars Galaxies, even though we've shown that this is possible, even though we've shown that if you give them the reasonable capability to make their own servers and reasonably they can do it, even though the servers aren't being funded by the former company, even though the technology isn't being supported directly by the former company, they're not continuing to do bug fixes or anything, the player base themselves, if given and let me say this again, if they left it in a functional, playable state, players will make it happen. So we've shown this is 100% possible, even with products where this should be difficult. Second example, City of Heroes was shut down despite being a profitable MMO still. The player base still managed to reverse engineer enough of the game's code to put up their own pirate servers. Further, NCSoft themselves have given the Homecoming pirate servers, one of the 4 pirate servers, an official license, meaning it is no longer a pirate server. So we have seen here that a company managed to maintain their intellectual property, but they gave away the license and they did say you guys will be legally allowed to run this server. This worked out best case for everybody. The server runners are in no legal gray area. They have the right to do it. And the original developers maintain their intellectual property rights, so no one's rights have been infringed on. So I'm hoping you're understanding here that these examples prove it is possible, even with games that should have no right to be run by the community. I mean, not right in a literal way. I mean, right as in, like, it should be quite difficult for people to have done this, and yet they did it anyway. So this is definitely possible. This is definitely something that should not be difficult for companies to do. But this has been a solution to the problem that has worked out, although it does have some obvious flaws. By giving away a license to the Homecoming server, they are no longer in any legal issues hosting the servers. Players can continue to access and play the game, and NCSoft continues to own the intellectual property. The big flaws here are the 3 pirate servers with no license are legally unprotected despite all 4 servers seeking to keep the game alive after its official shutdown. The initiative being discussed here is entirely so that these servers are not in any legal issues hosting the servers. It is a very good idea to make sure everything is legally acceptable before the issues start happening, especially when they will continue to happen more and more in the future. And that's something I want to get into. It is quite important that we make sure that all these people are legally protected, because going forward into the future, as all these MMOs from the 2000s and 2010s, as they start to shut down and people start hosting their unlicensed servers to maintain them so that players can continue to play them, they're all going to be in a legal gray area, and there's going to be more and more and more of this happening, and we might see people getting sued, and we might see people just trying to maintain a game they paid for. Just trying to use a product they paid for. We might see people get sued. In the current situation, they will be sued successfully. Okay, Additionally, NCSoft still has the ability to force all the servers to shut down. This solution is entirely still controlled by the company that shut the game down in the first place and is entirely a temporary solution. So once again, if they decided to make City of Heroes 2 and they wanted to shut down all the servers to force people to buy their new product, they would have the full right to do so. Even if people bought the original product and they just wanted to continue to play it, they could be totally shut out from their game. I'm going to play devil's advocate now. We're pretty much hopefully done with this, and hopefully I've made this pretty clear through repetition just how this issue is very fixable, very doable, and reasonably companies should not have the ability to dismantle your product. Games that require an online connection can easily be changed to not require an online connection. Games that have a multiplayer component could easily be changed so that despite the official servers coming down, players could host the servers. There's no need for this to even be a problem. The developers make it a problem, and then they refuse to find a solution so that they can continue to take your money away from you. But let's talk then about devil's advocate. Let's talk about 3 questions here. Should small games with tiny remaining player bases still be required to put in this effort? Yes. Yes, they should. Does not matter how small your game is. Does not matter how many people are still playing your game. You should always have a plan for the end of life of the game to involve people being able to still continue to play the game. I've seen this raised on Pirate's video a few times where he said, well, if a game is so small and it only has dozens of players, should it really? Yes, they should still have to put in the effort because they still sold the product. And if you originally designed the product with this end of life cycle in mind, then it will become significantly easier to manage because you already have it in mind, because you've already got the plan, you've already got it done. That it's not as hard as anyone's making this out to be. This is quite simple, in fact. Do we design a game that we can shut down? No. Do we design a game that can continue to be played? Yes. Ta-da, you've done it. Okay. If a game will never be popular again, does it matter if it dies out? Still, yes. This is another thing I've seen where people say, well, if Cities of Hero never gets popular again, was there any point? Yes, there was, because lots of people enjoy playing it and lots of people enjoy continuing to play it. A game that they might have had memories with, nostalgia with, and of course, even if people aren't continuing to play it, they might want to go back to it one day. They might want to play it again one day. They might want to experience that again one day, and they should have the ability to do that so long as they paid for it originally. Some game designers might find it difficult to reasonably implement the changes. Isn't that a bad thing? No, because if you go, this is a cop-out, and I've seen this so many times, this is a cop-out. If you design your product to fail, it will fail. If you don't design your product to fail, it's not going to fail. We've got decades and decades and 40, 50 some years of video games being developed that have shown 99.9999999% of games are designed totally reasonably with the ability to leave said video game in a functional, playable state after end of life. All these games have been designed with that. We only are starting to see now that companies are killing their games, or as we would phrase it here, destroying their video game. So I hope that makes this all simple, because this issue really is not complicated. This issue is not really that big a deal. This should be something that is not dramatic. There should not be 1.2 million views on a video attacking it that doesn't actually use the proper name. This shouldn't be dramatic. This shouldn't be a big issue. There should not be giant twit loggers from some, let's say, idiot douchebag trying to put corporate interests over individual interests. This is unneeded. It's a simple thing. I hope I explained how simple this is. It's going to be a problem going into the future. Let's stop this right now. Let's make laws right now before this becomes an issue, and let's just get this fixed right now. Okay. So make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to leave a comment down below. Give me your thoughts. Do you think this is as simple as I'm making it out to be? Because I sure hope by the end of this video you agree with me. But if you don't, let me know. And as always, make sure to, I just said that part. As always, I hope all of you have a great rest of your day. Goodbye, everybody.